Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It looks snowy, but I think the people of the south are going to get it this time. Maybe not us as much. Unless they've changed the track in the last little bit. Well, book of Job today is where our lesson comes from. And not the lesson that I was expecting out of the book of Job, which I think sometimes is a good surprise. The author from our quarterly, what they want to cover today, I think is a very, very good lesson, and we'll definitely get to it. I do want to go over a few things. Listen, the book of Job is so well known. The story's known. We have the modern day analogy, patience of Job. There's a lot of reasons that comes from there. There's so much in that book that you could study. And just to be honest, maybe it's my ignorance, that's not exactly if I was picking the lesson, that's probably not the one I would have pulled from it. But I think it's really, really neat how every Sunday or every time we have Wednesday night Bible study or we're studying on our own, the Lord reveals things to us if we go at it with the right mindset. And we're going to get things that we necessarily haven't always picked up before. And sometimes I think it's a good thing that the obvious lesson is not the lesson that you're trying to always achieve. And that non-obviousness of God's Word is what makes it special. And what is really, truly special is depending on what's going on in your life at the time that you're studying, you may get a completely different message out of something that you've read 100 times. And I think that's the beauty of the book. The book doesn't evolve. The book is the book, right? The word's the word. As Lonnie had mentioned in our Wednesday night, the first books of our Bible are the same as the Torah. The first Old Testament books relate directly back, and they go so far back in time, but yet everything is still applicable to today. I think anytime we get surprised like this, in my mind, it takes us to the point that God 100% knows what He's doing. And if we ever lack in feeling it that way, it's going to take us straight to what our lesson is today. If we read something and don't understand it, maybe it's the fact that we're lacking. God's never lacking in what He presents to us. That little soapbox, let's do a little bit of Job, if you guys are okay this morning. And if you've got your Bible, we'll actually go to the first chapter of Job, and then we're going to kind of skip over. We're going to kind of scan and read through it. I'll do the best I can not to get lost. But I think we've got plenty of time for the lesson today. And there's really 3 or 4 things today I'd like us to pick up without being a shortfall of what our intended lesson is. One of the things, our lesson, that we go straight to it's compelled to act. So, when we should be compelled to act on the benefit of others, and when we should be compelled to act particularly for people that can't help themselves as much. And I don't mean to always loop this, but, the sick, the poor, the downtrodden, those with lack of faith, those that have personal ailments, spiritual ailments, mental ailments. That's kind of where our lesson's going today. And one of the things that I pulled this straight out of our quarterly, and that I thought was a good way to start it, and I'm quoting it, "Let the fear and majesty of God compel you to look after each other." That's a really, really good idea. And again, it shouldn't be limited to folks that are poor and downtrodden or having a hard time. That should be our daily. We're getting a little bit of a theme going in here in our quarterly about loving and caring and taking care of each other and looking after our fellow man. That's kind of a recurring message. And as we went in other lessons, that was actually a commandment to us, is to love. And that if we can't love our neighbor, we can't love God. We fall short of that gap. But in the book of Job, that I like to do, they're not 100% sure who the author is, and never thought about it before. But being the story in the book ends with how many years he lived and he died, it's probably not Job that wrote this. I mean, it's somebody else's account. And a lot of biblical scholars in what research that I looked into think that maybe even Moses actually was the person that maybe not penned it, but made sure that this divinely inspired word was a part of the history of the Bible and a part of what ended up making it ultimately into the Word. First, the poetry books. So let's keep that in mind as we go through it. I think when you guys heard the ones that were here for the prophecy conference, there are some books. I mean, the entire Bible, the word is literal for 99.9% of the time, but there are some of the poetry books as well as Psalms, and you do have some poeticness to this writing. This writing has a Babylonian, Hebrew, and Aramaic influences both. So those folks as a whole wrote a bit more poetic, Shakespearean, whatever you want to call it, than we write. I mean, I'm bad to send Mike a text and I'm like, hey bud, have a nice day. And I literally mean, hey bud, have a nice day. I don't say the winds are lofting and the sun is shining and there's eyes peeking through the sky on this day. But we're not as poetic, but I think we should appreciate that. I mean, it does. It makes it a nice read, and it puts images in our mind, and it helps us kind of wrap our arms around what we're reading. The main point of the book of Job, besides we get the patience piece out of the book of Job, but the main point is the problem of evil. So as we kind of go through the real quick version, we're going to find a man that has it all. Okay, very different from a lot of our other biblical characters, I would say. Has it all and is faithful, and due to the fact that he has it all and he is faithful, he becomes a target. Who does he become a target of?
No.
The old devil, right? The devil basically, the way the book starts off, is Job has, let's just start. Let's go to Job 1. Because when you talk about the riches and plenty of this guy, as described in the Bible, this guy got a lot.
Probably works for Lonnie.
He don't work for him. He might be one. There was a man in the land of Uz, and it is Uz, not Oz. no flying monkeys. Whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and the one that feared God, and asserts evil. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance also was 7,000 sheep. 7,000 sheep. I had like 8, and that was more than I could shepherd. And Ryan's had as many as 40, and that's more than he can shepherd, because a sheep is a critter. Y'all keep this in mind when I'm doing my dad always used to say a sheep and a goat are born looking for a place to die. That's what their goal in life is. They don't want to survive. Their survival instinct is almost none. And there's a really good truth to that as we look at shepherds being chosen in the Bible as folks that are important. And the other thing that we've got to remember, and this is partly from watching The Chosen and a few of the things that's been on lately, that I had never realized. I mean, they not only worried about like coyotes and dogs, they worried about lions. I mean, being a shepherd's a big deal. I mean, when they compare Christ to being a shepherd and leaving the 99 for the one, that's a huge deal, because these critters are basically helpless. And of course, we're referred to as sheep often. There's a reason for that. We like to aimlessly wander around and look for a place to die, right? But his substance was 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels. 3,000 camels. Now, I don't know what kind of feed bill that would be, but that's a big feed bill. 500 yoke of oxen, 500 she-asses, and a very great household, so that this man was the great. I mean, this guy is a guy. He's going to have power. He's going to have influence. He's a leader, not a follower. And of course, again, I think bringing it to modern time and some of the things we've been talking about with Lonnie, this guy's a leader. He's a true leader. And whose heart is he after? God's. Right? And he's a little bit better off than some of what we got here, there, and yonder. And all of his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone, in the morning, and offered a burnt offering according to the number of them all. And Job said, "It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus did Job continually. So, real quick there, this man is after God. He's also the leader of the family. And what did it just say he did? He enacted upon his sons and daughters' behalf. I mean, people that have kids, we pray for our kids. People that have grandchildren, spoil the devil out of them, but that they have. So, really good introduction to Job. We see what he's at and where he stands for. And I'm going to go into just a little bit farther. Satan actually goes up and gets permission to tempt Job. Now, as I said before, and we've looked at other lessons, God personally, keep this in mind in this temptation, God doesn't do any of these things to Job. God allows it to happen. So God's not strict. God allows this to happen. Basically because the old devil goes up there and he's been, basically says he's going to and from the earth. That's scary. But that's kind of where we're at. We've talked about this in the last little bit about the fact that Satan and his demons and dominion has some free run, right? And honestly, they are responsible at times I personally feel, for some of the things that happen to us, some of the afflictions, some of the things that happen. But basically, Satan goes to God, and of course, this other author kind of said it's almost a temptation of God, but God's like, "Look at my faithful servant Job. Have you run across him?" And he's like, "Yeah, I've run across him. He's got everything in the world. You take it away." Job's heart, right? So he's like, "All right, old boy, get at it." So basically, Job becomes afflicted, and this stuff, I want to make sure everybody understands, the stuff that happens to this man doesn't happen just over like years. It happens. And when it happens, these messengers start coming. And he don't want to see another messenger, right? His camels are gone. Sheep, they had this fire. The wind is blowing this structure down, this house that has his children. They're gone. I mean, all of this stuff happens and afflicts him. Well, what does Job do? He stays faithful to God. And then in the second chapter, and I'm not going to get in trouble with Jamie, but Satan comes back down one more time. It's like, well, basically, he's still got his health. And just paraphrasing, I mean, God's like, all right, you can't kill him. I'm not going to let you do that to him. But go ahead and do something else. So he gets to the crown of his head. Painful, not just itchy. And his wife even says at this point, she kind of throws up her hands as like, why don't you just curse God and die? I mean, this is terrible. I mean, this is awful. So, again, what does he do? He stands fast. He stays steadfast in his relationship and love and respect and honor for God. We can go through this thing, and I'd love to, line for line, but the quick other summary is you get three friends that come along, right? And these three friends come to him, and they start trying to console him. Not really console him, like a friend should, but they start talking to him. And, it would be like Mark coming over when my barn when it fell down in Helene. I knew that if I had a few more bolts and braces up, it could have withstood the storm. But I didn't plan for a hurricane, I planned for normal conditions. But it's not a whole lot of consolation if Mark comes down to the house like, Kris, if you had like 5 more cross braces on that thing, I mean, that's not being a good friend. That's not helping me feel better about my situation, right? Ryan burned up all his hay the other day. I'm going to give him about 3 lessons of why that hay burned up, right? But would that have been any consolation to him? But these guys, basically, human nature being what it is, they come and they talk to him, and I think it even says they maybe sat with him for like 7 days in silence. And then when they start explaining his predicament, it's because he's done wrong. Hey, Job, this stuff happened to you. You had to have sinned. You had to have done this. You had to have fell short in your walk. Otherwise, God wouldn't have let this happen to you. I mean, that's where they go. And, that's sad, guys. I mean, that in itself is sad. And at least it makes me feel a whole lot better that at the end of this whole thing, when they present their case basically to God, everybody remember what happens to them guys? Job has to end up going and they go offer sacrifices back. Because God basically gives them a little chastisement about the way they presented his case. They didn't present his case like, hey buddy, I'm here to get your back. They presented it like, man, and then you get this other guy, and he shows up, young boy, and he has a different take on it. I don't know how he plays in, if he's a true friend, but Elihu is the best way I can say it because I've been around Eli Joyce too long. But he actually comes and he's a younger, it says, and when he kind of waits his turn to speak after these other guys have spoke. And if you guys will look, we're not going to get into his speech, but his monologue or his conversation is 32 through 37, everything you read in Job is what this guy has to say. And he thinks that a little bit that Job's, acting like he's totally innocent and that his suffering may be unfair. But he's also kind of angry at Job's friends. He sees the fact that these friends aren't being what I would consider what a friend should do. And there's a couple key ideas that Elihu brings out that the rest of them doesn't, is that God is, and I'm going to read this straight for some notes, but God is greater than any mortal. Why complain to him if he responds to no one's words? And that's out of verse 12 and 13 and 33. And then he also brings up the point that suffering could be a form of discipline, but not punishment. So, as he says, but those who suffer, he delivers in their suffering. He speaks to them in their affliction. So, he's still kind of with those other guys a little bit here, but he does take a more positive outlook on it. Not, man, Job, you messed up, so, man, all your camels is gone. I mean, he takes a little, and then the one thing that Elihu brings to the table that the rest of them doesn't is he explains to Job, turning to evil, which you seem to prefer affliction, and Elihu warns Job against getting too caught up in his own frustration and losing sight of God's justice. And basically, the summary of that is he kind of explains to Job, in so many words that maybe you're focusing too much on yourself. Now, if I put myself in Job's shoes, I think Kris would be thinking about Kris. It's human nature. That's why it's in the book. We're not here to put Job 100% on a pedestal. Again, most of the characters that are presented to us throughout the Bible have shortcomings. God deals with those shortcomings and we overcome the shortcomings. We all have shortcomings. I listened to a preacher the other night and he had a great statement. He said the first Christian or any person walking the face of the earth that says I'm good, I don't sin, that's the biggest lie ever told. Because the Bible itself says all men have fell short of the glory of God. So you can't put yourself there because God already said there's only one perfect one. There is only one, and we know who that is. So, what's the divine response to all of this back and forth, Job in his mind, Job with his friend, Job with Elihu? What's God's response? Anybody want Job? God appears to Job how in this book? As a whirlwind. He shows up as a wind. We've seen him show up as fire. We showed, later we see with Paul, like on the road to Damascus. He shows up in all these different ways. Well, this time it's a whirlwind. Of course, I think it's applicable to the lesson because all this bad stuff that happened to Job happened in a whirlwind. It happened before he could do anything. Do you realize that there are several chapters that God speaks to Job as this wind? It's like, I think it's 4. I had it written down. I'll look in my notes in a minute. But think about that. How would any one of us sitting here in class today like to get a 4-chapter humbling from God? And that's a lot. Because you can do a lot in one chapter. Job went from being the best guy to the richest guy in the world to nothing in one chapter. 4 chapters worth of basically Dad's teaching me a lesson here. Dad's dealing with me. And then the best part of the whole book, and I promise we'll get into these other verses, is the comeback. So at the end, you look over at the end, and let's just go there real quick. Go to the last page of Job. Might not be the last page, it's the next to last page on mine. So when all of this is over with, Job answered the Lord and says, I know thou canst do everything, and that no thought can be withholden from me. Who is he that hideth counsel without knowledge? Therefore I uttered that, and I understood not things too wonderful me, which I knew not. There's Job's, there's other verses, but there's Job's realization. God basically comes to Job and proves to him, I am God. I am omnipotent. I am all-knowing. You are Job. You're lowly to a point. You are my child, but you don't have all the answers. You don't know why I do what I do. You don't fully understand. But God saw Job's faithfulness, i.e. the patience of Job, and he ends up giving him, in verse 12, 42, the Lord blessed the latter end of Job more than the beginning. So he made him, not just made him whole, made him better than he ever was. He has 14,000 sheep now, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, 1,000 she-asses. I know this is a little bit weird in its Old Testament, and it kind of sat weird with me too, but he had lost his children. He had lost his lineage, which is super important. Nobody wants to lose any child, but they were replaced. At least his lineage was replaced. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And he called the name of the first Jeremiah, and the name of the second Keziah, and the name of the third Karen Hapuch, is what the closest I'm going to get. And the land were no women found. And this is really a neat thing in the Bible, and there was a whole section I was reading on this weekend. None of the women were found so fair as the daughters of him, and the father gave them inheritance among their brethren. So not only does Job get made whole, but super important to realize, like, the Bible doesn't usually go into the daughters. I mean, they talk mostly about the male lineage and what the males did and but he made them beautiful and rich, right? I mean, he blessed the entire family. And then the awesome part about this is after this, and I think this is a literal after this, not his total lifespan. I think this is after he's endured everything, lived 140 years. He saw his sons' sons, even 4 generations. I mean, that's literal. I mean, he got granted another 140 years for a reward, for a blessing. And then, again, as I told you before, the reason most authors don't think this is penned by Job, because it ends with, so Job died being old and full of days. It's kind of hard to write your own death. Awesome book. Of course, this is an awesome book. The lesson, and asked Jamie, I looked at her last night, and I was like, we're in the book of Job, this is going to be awesome. This is going to be easy. Has anybody read, honestly, like, raise your hand. Did anybody read the lead into this thing? I mean, even if you did it 5 minutes ago. Has anybody read the lead in? April went, So I was sitting there last night getting ready. The lead into this author, I'm going to go ahead and call this author out because he put me in a fine. This Argyle Smith, he's a retired pastor and professor of preaching at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. It's right there on the bottom of the page. But when he talks about compelled to act, as we get fully into the lesson, he talks about unborn children. Okay? This author goes straight into abortion. The value of human life, the sanctity of human life, which I don't think there's anybody in this church house that would not believe that. We are not, I promise, going to start a discussion about where the line is drawn, or if there is a line on abortion. But I struggle with this all night. What I'm going to say about it, to give it the merit it deserves, is that this example of these people holding up this ultrasound is an example of probably, the most sacred to Christ, all children, and the most helpless of all kids. Again, Jamie had some sheep born the other night. It was 20 degrees. Goats, not sheep, goats. And one made it, one didn't. One wasn't fully formed. She nursed it for 2 nights. She slept with this baby goat on our couch. She didn't get much sleep at all, with a bottle. She took it straight from mama before it got cold. It wasn't able to get up and nurse properly. She had replacement colostrum on hand. It was ready to go. She had it warm. She got it in it. She did everything right. She massaged it. She loved it. She dried it. She slept with it for 2 nights, and it passed away in her arms. And she came into our room, carrying this little innocent creature, and it was gone. And its brother's out there in 20 degrees bouncing off mama's back. I mean, nothing doesn't happen for a reason. I mean, it comes right back to our lesson. Just the innocence of that life. But that little goat that made it, the little brown goat, made it where a human baby would not have in the same circumstance. I mean, the human baby had on the ground in 20-some degrees, and mama lays down beside it as best she can and does everything she can. There's probably a good chance, we need to get to a hospital or a house or a shelter. Humans are the most frail creatures that's ever been put here. I mean, every predator that exists, from a bird predator to a lion, till the point that we get large enough and we actually use our mind and our resources, that's how God made us dominant over the animals. And that's what, but at the point we're an infant, we're completely vulnerable. We don't have any survival instincts. Our instinct is to lay there and ball up and cry. I mean, we don't have a flight. We can't. At least, little goat can run to a point. We can't even do that. So it still brings back, I know Mike will know this, so there's an old saying that God created men and Sam Colt made them equal when he invented the firearms. There's a really good point to that. We're frail. I mean, we need help. We need clothes. We can't just survive out in the wilderness. But again, we're not going to even go down that road. If y'all want to have a separate discussion about where you think that lands, you can do that. But Job, again, the author picks this Job 31:13-15, and I've sat here and I've read it like 5 times. If I did despise the cause of my manservant or my maidservant, when they contended with me, what then shall I do when God riseth up? And when he visiteth, what shall I answer him? Did not he that made me in the womb make him? And did not one fashion us in the womb? So, as Job's going through all this stuff that he's going through, again, we find Job, rich guy, everything's taken away from him, but yet as our courtly says, straight out of it, Job testified that he considered his servants to be equal to him. Job didn't put himself on a pedestal. These friends that kind of alluded to the fact that Job put himself on a pedestal that, in my opinion, weren't really good friends at all, Job never did that. What Job got chastised for was, and I'm going to be careful how I say this because I've got something for the close if we get there, but let's just use the word questioning of God. Now, again, not asking God a question. I really do want to get into that because I've waited for weeks for something that would tie into it. Not actually asking God a question, but questioning God. Questioning God's ability. Questioning God's intent. Not, hey God, how can I do this or how can I help? More of a condescending questioning. And like I said, if we got time to close with it, we will. If not, we'll do another day. But the book right here says, a mother's womb of all things levels the playing field. So again, God created man. Everybody kind of comes the same way. Not kind of, they do. But the way you actually come out may be a little different. But it's a level playing field. I mean, everybody in the mother's womb has no necessarily inherent advantage over anybody else. Some may have problems different than anybody else physically or as they're being developed mentally. But everybody's on this equal playing field. So that's why they picked this example, the womb. Okay? Because again, we're going to the point that they want us to get is let fear and majesty of God compel you to look out for others. So if we're going to go there, let's get everybody on equal playing field. So nobody's got a Colt 45 right here. Okay? Nobody's greater than anybody else. Fourthly, if we ignore powerless individuals or deny justice for them, most folks will never even notice it. Think about that in our daily life. Even if they do see it, they probably wouldn't call you about it. And secondly, though folks around us may not pay attention to when we turn away from the need, guess who does see us? God. The other thing I want to pull right here is, straight out of this, in our culture, human life tends to be devalued. As a result, helpless faces in our world can be overlooked to the point that they almost become invisible. So, let's think about this. I don't know, how many of y'all kind of were familiar with the homeless camp in Wilkes? Does anybody know about the little tent city that they had down there? I mean, you hear about it in California, and sometimes we brush it off because all of California is crazy, and you about half think. I mean, it makes me feel better. I kind of half think that half of them want to live like that. They're probably the same people goes to Burning Man, right? But a lot of them aren't there because they want to be there. they're not necessarily choosing to live off the land or choosing to live out of the pocket of others. I mean, there are people in true dire situations. Oh, there's a church down there in Wilkes, and I'm involved with some of the stuff, projects in Wilkes where around commissioners and mayors and councilmen and different people, and so I mean, I'm not picking anybody, but I've been in different conversations when they talk about their little homeless camp. And honestly, some of them have said plainly that part of the problem with the camp is there's a preacher that has a church, and it's right there behind what the old Mayflower is, and he runs a soup kitchen. He feeds these folks on a weekly basis, sometimes multiple weekly basis, and on the holidays. And rather than address the fact that these people are in need, and rather than address the fact that these people have problems, and rather than necessarily trying to come up with a better situation for them, the easiest thing is if you could just get them to set up camp in Yankeeville, or Boone, or Ash, right? I mean, out of sight, out of mind. I mean, you've heard that a million times. And to go to the fact that you would even question the fellow that's helping them, saying he's creating a bigger problem for us because now they like to camp in that area. Why they want to be there? They don't have a car, they don't have a bicycle. Some of them have got some grocery carts, but they have gravitated to where help is. And the great thing about it is they've at least gravitated to a church for help. How can a humble view of ourselves help lead to fair treatment of others? I'm going to shut up for a minute. Think about that question, because it's a really, really good question.
There, but by the grace of God go I. It can happen to any one of us at any point.
We're only 5 seconds away from a stroke, where you could lose half the use of your body, all the use of your body, all the use of your mind. We could wake up tomorrow without vision. We could wake up tomorrow without hearing. We could wake up tomorrow not able to get out of bed. So why would we ever put ourselves on a pedestal? And why would we ever ignore the downtrodden? I mean, we just can't. I mean, everything we believe here, again, as we go through that story, everything that all of us believe here, if we're not willing to love and help our neighbor, is for nothing.
When you think about it, Jesus was homeless.
Jesus was a homeless carpenter. And as Lonnie said, I thought it was really cool. If you missed Wednesday, go back, please, and watch Wednesday night Bible study. When he got in, does anybody understand these crafts, these tradesmen? And that they congregated together. The tent makers congregated together. But Jesus was technically homeless. They used other houses for the Last Supper. They used other people's. His birthplace was borrowed. His tomb was borrowed. I mean, Jesus or his family didn't even own the place he was laid to rest. What would we have thought? I mean, if we were there, about this guy. I asked Lonnie the other night about, these preachers. Lonnie asked a really good question in the message about if you would have the right to choose how to spread the gospel, would preaching be the way you would have chosen? There's, obviously what God chose. But we had a roundtable discussion within the church of think about what them fellows faced. Think about the beauty and the miracles and the miraculous thing that they had just faced. And then think about these people going out into the world and going into a Roman area of Gentiles that had their gods, or going into a Greek area of Gentiles that had their gods, and go and try to carry a message of this guy that was born, that is God, that's part of God, that is a piece of God, and he's God on earth, and he comes and he dies, but he doesn't really die, and he gets resurrected, and he goes to heaven, Then he comes back and reveals himself. Think about that message to somebody that's 70 years old. I mean, I dwelled on it all week. Think about that. All right. I mean, these people didn't do anything wrong. The New Testament that we read was being written about the folks that we read about. So we have more knowledge than they have. We understand what's right, wrong, and different, and it's presented to us. But they were living it. So, again, put yourself in their place, and, this preacher comes. Especially if you get to like Paul. People knew who he was. His past hadn't completely gotten by him. But think about this guy that comes and tells you this story when for 70 years you thought that lightning came from Zeus and war came from Ares and love came from Athena and Cupid flies around and shoots people with arrows and picks their spouse and all that stuff. And try to convince them in 15 minutes or look, I'll give you 3 hours. But our conclusion was that Wednesday night was it wasn't what the men and or women that went out said. It was that they were obedient to God and they delivered the message that God told them to deliver, and that seed we've talked about so many times gets planted, and then God brings the conviction. God brings the Holy Spirit. God brings the understanding to these folks. No man, Billy Graham, Franklin Graham, Lonnie Jones is going to, on their own merit, go convince some 70-year-old guy that's believed something his entire life that you're wrong and you need to follow this. If you don't, you die, you're going to go to hell. Right? But again, the obedience to God, same as Job, is what gets that message to these people that ultimately gives them that salvation that's promised. But God is the one that laid that conviction on them, not Lonnie Jones. Lonnie can explain the Bible better than anybody I've ever met, but he ain't going to get them there. They're going to get them there. What excuses do people make for not helping people in need? What's our easy out? And if this thing goes off, what's the easy out? What's the easy excuse?
I don't feel good.
I don't feel good. I ain't got time.
Don't know how.
Don't know how.
Too tired.
Too tired. Don't have money.
They won't listen.
They won't listen anyway. And I'll add to that. I'm embarrassed. It's not a manly thing. I lived that 2 or 3 years ago. I'll probably talk about it next weekend at Men's Day. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. I don't feel like that's, again, a manly thing to do, right? Go hug Mike's neck. Good Lord, he's ugly. Why would I want to hug his neck and tell him I love him? Right? So, I'm going to skip all the way back to question 1 before we get to the last verses. And then, like I said, I hope we got time for this one little discussion that we can hopefully carry on. Woo! Alright, we'll turn this thing off. No fit. I'm going to turn it off. I'll just be a little bit loud. The first question in our quarterly, told you I didn't need it, said, when have you thought, brace yourself? So I'm literally going to pick on people and go around. I'll go this way, White, so you got plenty of time. Heather, when have you said, brace yourself? Besides when I walk in up there complaining about my health.
You walk in the office. No, I'm just kidding. As a clinician, sometimes when you get results back on a patient and they're worse than you thought, you have to brace yourself for whatever you're going to have to deliver to them.
Very good. Bobby? Brace yourself.
Just when things don't go the way you think they should, or something happens that people ain't gonna like.
Massey, what's up? What? Brace yourself. Not combat either. He's got a bigger gun than I got.
I think, it's not combat, but, October 28th, 1985, Paris Island, South Carolina, about 23:59 a.m. or p.m. The crap was about to hit the fan. That's probably one of the greatest times I've ever said, what I get myself into, you know.
Debbie?
I think when you go to the doctor and you know the diagnosis is coming.
Don? Mikey?
What was the question?
Brace yourself. What's coming? What's happened to you before that you're like, brace yourself?
Well, some days things just don't go right. You think you're trying to live a good and righteous life, and you can't help but question sometimes, well, why is this happening to me? Why did this mess up? Why didn't it go right? But it tests your faith, and you come up with answers that it ain't God's fault.
Nope.
You look back, it's my fault. Things that I did that I shouldn't have done that resulted in why I'm having a hard day. So you always have to have faith in the Lord, take care of it, and you have to own up to things that I didn't do right.
Daniel?
That's an easy one for me, Chris, because I was talking with you about it before church started. But Wednesday, Travis came to me and told me I had to work on a boat. Never worked on a boat before in my life. So, long story short, the motor was easy. I'm figuring out the rest of it.
Why am I gonna pick on you?
I'll break something of yours.
When you break something of mine, I figured you'd get me back. That's the wittiest kid there's ever been. He won't ever let you put him on an island. Alright, let's read through the rest of this real quick. If I have withheld the poor from their desire, or caused the eyes of the widow to fail, or have eaten my morsel myself alone, and the fatherless, again, these bastard children, not cussing, that's a real word, that are out there that are poor and they've not, for from my youth he was brought up with me as with a father, and I have guided her from my mother's womb. If I have seen any perish for the want of clothing, or the poor without covering, if his loins have not blessed me, and if he were not warmed with the fleece of my sheep, and I'm going to finish, if I have lifted up my hand against the fatherless when I saw my help in the gate, then let mine arm fall from my shoulder blade, and mine arm be broken from the bone. For destruction from God was a terror to me, and by reason of his highness I could not endure. So I threw those both together not to run us through it that quickly, but these last two sections are one and the same. People who wrestle with despair, people who suffer from hunger, people who lack those. We're back to a description here of some of these folks we're talking about. People who lack a reliable family. Ask Jamie how that goes for any kid from the age of 5 to 18. Ask her. And she can give you hours of what it's like to be fatherless or motherless or both. Or, grandpa's 80 and he's trying to take care of a 15-year-old and, all of those situations. People who literally live without the basic essentials. These people that I was talking to you about the tent city, those people that don't have anything. Job literally goes as far as talking about, straight out of our book, Job stood before a child who didn't have a father at the city gate. The city gate functioned as something like a courtroom. And again, Job is still in a position of power, and he is one of the city leaders that is responsible for passing judgment. And so other people that had issues with other people came to Job and the other leaders to seek justice, to seek advice. And Job observed this child's helplessness, and the mother might have even been standing there, but if she was just as powerless. And then straight out of her quarterly, Job could not raise his hand against this child. These leaders would have just as soon cast this child out. Put him on a side street down Hart and Main, and put him with the rest of these people. Put him out of her sight. If they die, they die. Get them far enough out of town. If they die, they don't stink. Get them far enough out of town where if we don't have to see it. And if we don't see it, it didn't happen. They didn't have Facebook. Most things don't happen if they don't go on Facebook. You gotta get that Facebook legitimacy. But put them out here, get them out of our sight, and let's not see them. And if we don't see them, we don't have to do anything about it. And if we don't smell them or see them or bury them or anything else, just let them go.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind. And what did Job say? He goes to the extreme that says, if I would have lifted my hand up, let my arm fall from my shoulder blade. And I truly believe he meant it. You look through the whole book, you look at his faith, I think he absolutely meant it. Now, quick close for like 4 minutes. The last question, and I'll let y'all think about it at home, because I want to give you a different one, and we will pick it up in some Sunday school lesson sometime in the future when it does fit. But the last one here was, what cultural issues today might require you to stand alone in doing right? And I know we can all come up with those. But think about those. I mean, that is, again, the point, or part of the point of the lesson. But the one I want to task you guys with, this one's from old Kris, and I'm going to task y'all with this one going forward, and we will discuss it later, is, and I'll give you my quick 30-second version of what I've been dealing with. Listen to a preacher the other day, and the entire name of his sermon for over an hour was, is it okay to question God? Okay? And some of the points that he brought up was even Christ himself on the cross asked God a question. The question that he asked.
Why hast thou forsaken me?
But you know, he didn't ask that question, and I want y'all to think about this, and we'll, like I said, we'll have a longer discussion. I've been running through that thing for weeks. And then the one little thing that came out of this to me that probably wouldn't have come out to anybody else with me questioning, and that is the fact that it's okay, and this is the gospel of Kris, to ask God a question. But I think as revealed to us from Job, there's a difference between why asking me a question as my son, hey Dad, why do we've been hanging sheetrock. Why do we run these screws in just a little bit and let it break through the paper? Okay? Why do we do that? That's a question. Questioning would be, why in the world are we doing this? You don't know what you're doing. So I'm going to leave y'all with that one, the difference between question and questioning, and we'll bring that up at a later time and we'll talk about that. So, hope y'all got something out of it today. You want me to stop this? Yeah, you know how to stop it.